So I remember these times, right? I'd be laying in bed with my bowl haircut playing Red version on my Game Boy. And I can't recall exactly what my team combos were back in the day, but I can definitely tell you that I shouldn't have relied on my Charizard to carry me through the game. Yeah, I was that kid with the over-leveled starter Pokemon. Anyways, I'd be lost pushing around the boulders in the caves of Victory Road and mad at myself because I didn't bring enough repels with me when all of a sudden my screen would cut off. Now this was before I knew about the put the batteries in the freezer technique, so I'd be on a mission whenever my Game Boy would die. I'd be slinking around the house, just obvious motives written all over me. First I would hit the TV remote in the living room and then the 2 other batteries from the remote in my parents' room. I'd even be smiling as I'd swap the batteries out, loading the new ones into the back of my Game Boy. Seriously, I was a little asshole back in the day. You'd even catch me obnoxiously moonwalking across the carpet back to my room and later on wondering why none of the TVs were turning on. Whether I was bunny hopping around town on my mongoose, hiding under the covers, pretending that I was asleep at 1 in the morning, or during long car rides, I always had some type of handheld console stuffed in my pockets. I remember those late nights with my lime green Game Boy Color and that little attachable light thingy. I remember linking my Game Boy Advance to my GameCube and unlocking the Fusion Suit in Metroid Prime. I remember smiling every time I would open my DS and hear, "It's me, Mario." And how could I forget having my mind blown the first time I played the PSP, thinking to myself, how insane is it that I can play Midnight Club 3 anywhere I want to now? I even beat Ocarina of Time for the first time on my 3DS because back in the day I could just never get past that damn water temple on the 64. Every time I would get a new handheld console, they always felt like these huge leaps in portable technology. Unlike when I bought myself the Xbox One, where the games just felt like PC versions of Xbox 360 games to me, and now where I have to squint just to see the extra little details. Handhelds always felt like they brought something new to the table outside of just more power. But the one thing that always had me coming back to home console though, was that they had those shiny graphics, those big blockbuster hits. No way was I going to pass up on games like Gears of War and Halo. One of my dreams was that one day I would be able to play Resident Evil 4 on the go. Not only did the Nintendo Switch make that dream come true, but when I got the Steam Deck earlier this year, it took things a step further because it let me play the remake of Resident Evil 4 on a handheld. One thing that I remember from working residential construction is that on every project, always tell the customer that it's going to take longer than expected. So if a project is going to take 3 days, tell the customer it's going to take a full week to complete. That way, when we finish in a few days, our company would get reviews praising us for how fast we were. Well, that's how I felt about the Nintendo Switch when it released. We always expect Nintendo consoles to be this downgraded experience compared to PlayStation and Xbox, so when they release a game like Breath of the Wild on this underpowered little tablet and it just knocks our socks off, it's essentially the same business tactic. One thing that's become more apparent with newer home consoles is that they focus way too much on graphics and performance, assuming that we're all snobs about frame rates and that we stop and stare at the 4K textures on some random wall or something. That couldn't be further from the truth, at least for me, because I care more about how a game feels to play way more than how it looks. And as far as performance, sure, I'd prefer it if every game ran at 60 and above, but I never found it to be a deal breaker over the gameplay experience. As long as the frame rate is stable and not constantly dipping, I can adjust. I played Dark Souls on the Xbox 360. Remember Blighttown? Yeah, well, the performance never soured my experience, so I'm completely fine with a stable 30 these days. And I'm having so much fun running through Dark Souls 1 Remastered on the Switch right now. I feel like Sony and Xbox marketing their consoles as these affordable PC-like experiences, it's kind of disingenuous because they're nothing like PC, and recently becoming less affordable, making it more of a reason to just move over to PC instead. That's why I've been enjoying the Nintendo Switch for the past several years, because it has everything I want from a console. It has a steady release of exclusive games I can't play anywhere else, I don't have to go in debt just to get one, and it's easy to use. None of those things have to do with the power of the console, and the numbers don't lie. The Nintendo Switch has sold, well, you already know. When we look at the handheld market today, the landscape is a night and day difference from a decade ago. Nintendo might still hold dominance, but the amount of options we have today is really too much to even keep up with. Every time I turn around, I see something new from third parties like Ambernic, Retroid, and All You Need's Odin devices. When the DS was selling like hotcakes in the mid-2000s, any attempts at competing with Nintendo at the time would have been considered suicide. But Sony, they did just that with the PSP, and it ended up being relatively successful. Seriously, Sony had some balls to go up against Nintendo, and this wasn't just some cheap imitator either. The PSP was a technical marvel at the time it came out. Games like Chains of Olympus, Liberty City Stories, and Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker were the type of experiences that you could only get from home consoles at the time. Along with the strong support of Japanese developers, the PSP had everything, seeing over 1,300 titles throughout its lifespan. It helped Capcom take a somewhat obscure series like Monster Hunter and turn it into a cultural phenomenon. It's likely that we wouldn't have seen Monster Hunter games on the 3DS or the success of Monster Hunter World without Sony's little handheld. In the end though, Sony didn't understand what made Nintendo handhelds so successful. 9 times out of 10, people just chose to buy Nintendo instead, with many people later on forgetting the Vita even existed after it came out. Sony's handhelds, they were just too expensive. There wasn't enough first-party exclusives, and the battery life was a deal breaker in many cases. Even now, what's the biggest red flag you always see with reviews of new handheld consoles? It's not the power, it's definitely not the graphical fidelity of the games. It always comes down to this: how long can I play for? Now with the Nintendo Switch 2's announcement seemingly on the horizon and everything from preloaded retro handhelds and portable gaming PCs, no longer do we have to be tethered to a TV screen in order to experience the full spectrum of what gaming has to offer. I bought a Steam Deck OLED earlier this year, and it has completely changed the way I play games. This thing is like an all-in-one life hack for completing the backlog, because at any time, I can just hop into my Steam library and play everything from the indies I forgot about to these massive games like Elden Ring I thought I'd never have time for. The initial concerns I had, with ergonomics and battery life when watching reviews is completely melted away, as this thing feels like it was surgically designed for human hands, and game sessions sometimes lasting up to several hours in between charges. At first, sure, I was fumbling around with the button layout because my thumbs were programmed to reach for an invisible D-pad, but I eventually adjusted. Now I pick up an Xbox controller and it feels weird having my hands so close to each other. I never had this happen with the Nintendo Switch because I was never able to adjust to the Joy-Cons, and I'd occasionally dock it to my TV or playing tabletop just to use the Pro controller instead. Because they're so uncomfortable, the one thing I could never do with Joy-Cons is play first-person shooters, and as much as I love gyro aiming, I could never get over the motion lag. The Steam Deck's gyro though, it is so smooth, it feels like zero latency. When I played Half-Life 2, it felt surreal to have one-to-one fluid motion as I would tilt the screen. I really can't oversell this enough, because before the Steam Deck, I always turned gyro off, even in games like Breath of the Wild. But to be honest, I was never really expecting to enjoy the Steam Deck as much as I do now, at least not for what it was. So then, why did I buy it if I wasn't expecting to enjoy it? I mean, that makes no sense, right? Well, at the time, I was really starting to feel burned out with modern games, and I decided to get into emulation and go back and play all the classics from my childhood. I ended up buying a Retroid Pocket 3 Plus and falling in love with it. I played a ridiculous amount of Game Boy Advance and PSP games on this thing. But the one thing it could never do is handle PS2 and GameCube emulation. So in my search for the perfect retro handheld, I stumbled across channels like Tech Dweeb, Aiden Walls, and shout out to Retro Games Core because I'm still fanboying over him leaving a comment on one of my videos. The The one thing that all these creators in the retro game space agreed on was that the Steam Deck was the king of emulation. So yeah, the only reason I initially bought the Steam Deck was because I wanted to play my old PlayStation 2 and GameCube games. As soon as I booted this thing up, I knew exactly what I was doing from all the videos I'd watched. I immediately switched over to desktop mode and went online to download EmuDeck, and the whole process took like 5 minutes. Within about a half hour, I was already playing classics like Need for Speed Underground 2, Most Wanted, God of War, Dragon Ball Z Budokai, Super Mario Sunshine, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess. I could go on and on. What I thought was gonna be me with the Steam Deck permanently docked to my monitor emulating old games turned into me leaning back in my recliner and reliving my childhood on this beautiful OLED screen. And now that I've owned the Steam Deck for the majority of 2024 and my honeymoon phase with it is pretty much over, I can say with confidence that at least for me, that the Steam Deck is the greatest gaming device I have ever played on. Whether it's 2025 when the Steam Deck 2 releases or until this thing breaks on me, I can see myself enjoying this thing for years to come. But I don't take this thing with me on the go though. Oh no, I cradle this thing in its case like a baby. Whenever I leave the house, my go-to is the Ambernic RG35XX SP. Hopefully I got that name right. So far, this device has been my favorite out of every low-budget retro handheld, with it looking nearly identical to a Game Boy Advance SP. I seriously have this thing in my pocket every time I leave the house, and this transparent red colorway is absolutely beautiful. I bought this thing for around the price of a AAA game too, and it already comes preloaded with hundreds of games. It's insane. I've been on a Metroidvania kick for the past few weeks, and I just finished up Metroid Zero Mission again, and I'm playing through Castlevania Circle of the Moon at the moment. Even though I already own the Advanced Collection on my Switch, this is my preferred way to play it. And that screen filter with the SP banner at the bottom looks so authentic. I feel like I'm trying to sell this device right now, like shit, where's my sponsor? But don't think that my Nintendo Switch is retired now just because I have these other handhelds. I just recently got myself a GameSir G8 Plus Galileo, and this telescopic controller is the pinnacle of Joy-Con replacements. You don't need things like those unibody slide-in controllers or the MobaPad Pro or Compact or whatever they're called. Even things like the Hyperion Pro controller. The Galileo is by far the most premium controller that I've ever used on the Nintendo Switch. After I'm done playing Dark Souls 1, I might just give 40K Bolt Gun and Dusk another go, because when I'm playing first-person shooters with this thing, the Hall Effect thumbsticks feel like they've been sprayed with WD-40, they're so smooth. I don't know, I just love talking about handheld consoles, and with all the amazing experiences that you can take with you on the go, I truly believe that we're living in the golden ages of handheld consoles. Now, I've told this story before an exhausting amount of times already, but it wasn't too long ago when I was feeling like quitting gaming altogether. And it was only through these portable experiences where I could fit gaming back into my schedule. I'm older now, so naturally I'm just busy trying to keep up with bills and a hectic work life. You add a kid on top of that, and it just squeezes you for most of your time. It becomes a precious commodity. So when I don't have to turn on my console and then my TV and sit in one spot to play a video game anymore, when I can just wake my Steam Deck or my Nintendo Switch up and start any game from where I left off, no matter where I'm at, this luxury that I used to take for granted when I was a kid, when I had no responsibilities and I could easily run my game sessions into the double digits, it really is a game changer. With maybe a couple hours a day to chip away at a game, I don't have to think about things like battery life. So portability is really the only factor when it comes to gaming. Sure, I'm sacrificing a little bit of graphical fidelity when I'm playing games like Elden Ring on low settings, but if I was playing on consoles, I would never finish this game. I don't know. I love handheld consoles, and I felt like sharing it with you guys today. Let me know in the comment section what your favorite handheld console is. Okay, bye.